So it's now time to check some of the biggest stories to come out of our Sunday newspapers this morning with Fresh from the Press. To help us unpack these is Newzroom Africa's assignments editor, Olebogeng Kgosilentswe. A very good morning to you, Olebogeng. Thank you for joining us on Weekend Dawn. Tell us first up, what's on the Newzroom Africa diary this weekend?
Okay, so you do know that in the KZN there is quite a growing number steadily of COVID-19 cases. Out of the 65,736 that South Africa currently has, 3,763 are from that province. And last month, we remember the president commending the province really for its strides in trying to curb COVID-19. And so today, the Premier, Sihle Zikalala, will be handing over and opening a quarantine site that has 500 beds that continues in the province's stride to help curb the spread of COVID-19. So our camera operator, Zbo Ngubane, will be looking at that story today. And then we move to the Mpumalanga province, where Moeli Masilela will be delving deeper into the story of the hospitality in the province. So he's going to be talking to different owners of B&Bs and guest houses who say that even though under level 3 of the lockdown, they've been allowed to operate, but it seems things there are worse for them because municipalities have cut down on water and electricity supply to some of the accommodation places. And so how do you then operate after having been on lockdown for over 2 months? So he's going to be delving deeper into that story and investigating what's happening in the hospitality sector in general in the Mpumalanga province. And then this interesting story in Gauteng.
Oh, it even gives you a smile. Did you see how she smiled?
It is so interesting. So it's a Sunday. People are getting ready to go to church, if already not there at this point. And I know you speak Setswana, Lisa, I know you understand Setswana, so maybe you may understand what the word khabola means.
Khabola? No, please tell me.
It means to take a sip.
Aha.
So this church that Malungelo boy is visiting is called the Khabola Church, where they literally sip on alcohol.
What?
So the church leadership, it's in Everton, the church leadership opened this church. It's been in operation for many years. In fact, it operates from a tavern, from inside a tavern. And it has opened its doors for those people who are drinkers and who are not embarrassed to be drinkers, but want to be part of the church and want to involve themselves in church activities. And so the priests and the bishops there have said, come, let's drink. We all drink, but that does not mean that we don't want to congregate. Exactly. It doesn't mean that we don't want to practice our different faiths, whatever the case may be.
Or pray together.
Or pray together. But the only difference with us is that we drink, and we drink in the church. And so Malu is going to be visiting that church, and they're going to tell us how they've been surviving under level 4 and level 5 of the lockdown without their favorite drink, without having to khabola. Yeah, and so
is it all kinds of drinks?
All kinds of drinks.
Wow, not just
it
wine.
It operates from a tavern. So you can imagine that in a tavern there's all sorts of drinks. And so as the preacher goes on preaching, they keep on
takes a sip of his beer.
I just wonder, so only 50 people can congregate at once. I'm just wondering also what happens, how many drinks are you allowed to consume at church? How long does the service last? This is an interesting story. I'm sure Malu is going to be unpacking all that and more for us. Now, Ole, also looking at the newspaper front. I mean, we've got the 4 main papers, Sunday World, City Press, Sunday Independent, and the Sunday Times. Yep. I see you've got the City Press out there. So, look, black and bold, murder most found. Sekgofatso Pule's last words, I want to come back home.
Yes.
This is obviously, her friend says that she had a gut feeling that things were not okay before she sped off into the Jeep, of course, and then the nation was in distress once again as the scourge of GBV continues to be the pandemic that we're fighting subtly beyond racism and COVID-19.
Yeah, it's quite a somber story, Liesel, but I think the silver lining in it is that yesterday we heard the Minister of Police, General Bekicele, say that there is a lead, and they're following up on quite a strong lead, although they could not reveal the details because it would compromise the investigation. But the fact that in this article they state that the grey Jeep that Tsegofatso got into before she went home has been found. And they are busy now trying to find the owner of that car. I think the police have acted really swiftly with the help of the community as well to try to bring justice for Tsegofatso.
Wow, quite interesting. And on the Sunday Times newspaper, of course, Tsegofatso being the big story, another young woman cruelly slain hanging from a tree in a desolate veld. And then another story on the side here is taxis demand COVID-19 billions. So they were offered around 1.1 billion rand, a once-off payment to help keep them afloat, because all taxi operators were obviously suffering because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but they're demanding up to 4 billion rand to be able to stay afloat. And this is on the back of a fare increase. I feel as though this is unfair for the commuters.
Of course, it is unfair for the commuters. I mean, you saw last week, Jacob, how the commuters were speaking about that proposed increase that Santaco had imposed, particularly in the Gauteng region, with more specific reference to Alex. But also, it's an important one for the taxi associations and taxi owners. Remember that they've got, what can I say, repayments to deal with. They've got employees to pay. They've got petrol, fuel to pay for. So it's, where do you strike the balance if there's you're only allowed to carry 70% of your passengers and you don't get in as much money as you are used to, and with consideration of your passengers as well, because the passengers are those people that are in the employ of different industries in South Africa. And currently, right now, we do know how many jobs have been shed as a result of COVID-19 and how many people are working from home, and meaning that there's not a lot of income for many of the commuters. So it's quite a difficult one. And the commuters, of course, cannot afford this. They've kept on saying that we cannot afford increases, because where are we getting the money? Because we are not working, or we are not working as regularly as we used to, and we're definitely not getting the salary that we are used to. But to demand millions like that, I think it also stems from the fact that the Taxi Association claimed that even the small bailout that they were promised, they have not received. And so, you know, if there was something to whet their appetite, something to say, here, hold on to
Hang on to this for
you
now.
can make do with this for now. But even none of that has been forthcoming.
I'm looking at the Sunday Independent. I mean, the stories continue. Tsegofatso Pule, literally on the Sunday Times as well, City Press, and also the Sunday Independent. But another topic that's on the Sunday Independent in front of us is ruling could reset SA's electoral system. So this of course leads back to that unconstitutionality of the Electoral Act, and perhaps what this is going to do for the political landscape at large.
It's going to be a mess, I can imagine, for lack of a better word, perhaps. But, I mean, if you are now an independent candidate, you don't need to belong to a party
to contest,
for you to contest elections. And so how interesting will that be, Liesl? If we were not journalists, you and I could also contest elections.
Well, you could always quit and go that route.
You know, so it was quite an interesting one. It made headlines this week, and we saw the likes of Musi Maimane, you know, being very excited about it. And so it's quite a breakthrough for independent candidates. And also it is expected to be some kind of blow for political parties, because, I mean, now, where does the support come from when everybody can now stand for elections, you know?
No, it'll be interesting to see the voting patterns and how that is going to sway, you know, individuals versus the party. Because, I mean, they do have gravitas. You can't ignore that. But also just what it means for funding the campaign. But ultimately, it's all about ensuring that accountability and democracy reigns in the country. And it's at the best interest of us as a South Africa. So let's see, 2 to 3 years for this to come into effect?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and 2 to 3 years will pass by really quickly, and we will be reliving this conversation and saying, remember we spoke about this, here it is at play now.
It's going to be very interesting. Now, I'm looking at the Sunday World newspaper. Babes heads to court over drugs claim. That's one of the stories. And the other story is axe hangs over SABC workers. COVID-19 adds to the SABC's financial woes. State broadcaster wants to save 700 million rand in staff costs. Unions in the dark over plans to retrench staff. It seems like there's a lot of instability at the public broadcaster, and seeing something like this is actually not surprising.
No, it isn't. Do you remember in January, Jacob, the SABC put on hold the plans to evoke Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act, which in effect means to retrench staff workers. They had intended to retrench 981 permanent staff workers and 1,200 freelancers. Now, working in the news, we both understand what a potent staff component means for any newsroom. And well, this is not only referring to a newsroom, but I mean the public broadcaster is quite a large entity, and it takes quite a large sum of staff or component to make it run. And but what is worrisome about what this article says is that the unions are in the dark. Usually you have very competitive unions, the CWU, you have quite a lot of robust engagements between the management at the public broadcasters as well as unions or representatives of the employees. And now if they're in the dark, you can literally await a standoff. You can await a protest. You can await a really robust discussion. They will not let this go down lying. And it puts the Minister for Communications, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, in quite a quagmire. Yeah. Besides the controversy that usually clouds her, she now has to be sort of a buffer between the unions and what is happening at the public broadcaster.
And Olebogeng, speaking of the communications minister having a lot on her plate, I'm just looking at the city press once again. At the bottom, Stella walks into Newstorm. So apart from the woes at the SABC, her also making her return after that 2-month suspension.
Oh yes.
There's also seems a standoff between her and MPs over the appointment of councillors at ICASA.
Oh, no.
What's this going to do ultimately for her legacy that she wants to leave at in her portfolio, but also at ICASA at large, being that regulator that obviously handles the spectrum, and there's the battle there. There's also a race for a new chair. What are your thoughts on this story?
I think the minister's legacy will be quite a questionable one. I mean, for quite a lot of young women, I would say, if I'm to make an example of myself, I heard you guys have a conversation about what Youth Day means to the majority of us. And she's one of those pillars that one would look up to and say, if a young woman like this could do it, so can we. But you don't want those conversations that are now seeming to taint her image. If you can't go through a period of 3 months without a controversial story around her, then you start questioning the kind of legacy she's going to leave. And so, I mean, the debates at ICASA will continue going on. And as you rightfully said, the race for a chair, we do know that the standing chairperson is also quite a young one, but that's another conversation we can always have. Yeah.
Olebogeng Kgosilentswe, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. That was our assignments editor, Olebogeng Kgosilentswe, taking us through the Sunday newspaper headlines and the Newzroom Afrika diary for the day. I can't wait to actually see that Malungelo boy story, by the way.